nachos, amigos, and welcome to Record Breakers, a music podcast where a group of friends gather together, share music with each other, an album at a time. It's like a little book club for music. We're at it again. It's a fun time, always, at least for us. Hopefully for you too. I'm Petey Rave, and I have a crush on the music, but I just can't say how I feel. So we kind of just stay friends, that way, while they kind of go fall in love with the main love interests. But it's okay. Because really, I'm just happy that they're happy. And here with me, of course, is my team, my squad, my crew. We've got David.
Hi. I'm in a studio. It's kind of baller.
Yes. Baller. Ski. And of course we got Drew.
I just got an alarming message from work, so that's great. Apparently the entire back of their precinct at work smells like fire, so that's really good when a bunch of computers are being worked on.
We can only hope nobody dies in a fire. Speaking of dying in a fire, we've got our guest for this set of episodes. We have wonderful guests, somebody who's a good friend of ours, and a good dude, and whose music you have heard if you are a listener of Halijuku, as he is the provider of the opening and closing themes of Halijuku.
Kpoppodcast.com.
The one, the only, Mr. Nesh Complex himself, Bryce Castillo. How you doing, Bryce?
Hey, thanks for having me back, guys. It's been a few years since I've been on Record Breakers, but I'm glad to be back. I was glad to. I'll spoil you. I enjoyed listening to the two albums we're going to talk about in our recording session today. So
yes, it's going to be fun. It's going to be a fun time. Speaking of the albums that we're talking about, we're going to be talking about an album right now that I chose. It's going to be an album. So. I don't know if I actually promised it in the episode, but I did promise myself that the Lehigh album that we talked about a little while ago was the end of the P.D. Morin's Jonghyun trilogy. Because, you kind of just have to kind of like move on with your life. But this might not
that
be
was
like a
lie.
Yeah. That was not a lie, because it's no longer about mourning anybody. It's no longer about being sad. This is now just me going ahead and celebrating a really great group that I love in Shinee. This is more now the celebration of life. Celebration of the group. It's I would say my favorite boy band ever. Because I was never really super into boy bands before I got into K-pop, and within K-pop, they're my favorite boy group. And we're talking about their album, the repackage of their fourth album, Odd, known this time as Married to the Music. Let's talk about expectations. David, what were your expectations coming into this album?
I expected K-pop.
Yes.
Essentially, there would be some R&B influence, some electro funk. It would be in Korean with the occasional English lyric. I expected K-pop. But Petey, what I wanted to ask you is, when you mentioned that this was the fourth album repackage, the thing that I wanted to ask about, because when I was looking for information and credits on this, it took a little bit of work. So I wanted to ask you, why is this a repackage? What's going on here? I believe it was called Odd.
Yes.
What's going on here, Petey Rafe?
So real quick, they released their fourth album, Odd, with kind of its own title track, as in its own promotional single and its own promotional cycle. So after that promotional cycle happened, they went out, did music shows, did TV rounds, kind of promoted it out there, had the music video make the rounds, cut the right, the company cut the right checks to make sure the music video got played, that happened, it died down, and then they released the repackage album, which is basically, they released it again, but with new tracks. Think of it like the Game of the Year edition.
I'm gonna have to go Jim Sterling on the K-pop industry, PD Rive. Is that what we're doing?
It's the Game of the Year edition. It's repackaged with all the DLC included. So
And so because it looks like there are probably 4 new tracks on the Married to the Music repackage. Were those like singles that had come out after this album, or
one of them was a single, the other ones were add-on tracks.
Okay, because I think you don't see too much of I feel like you don't see too much of repackaging just in general. Even for a 2015 album, I feel like you would have seen a mini album of these other tracks, or a little EP or something.
Yeah, so I'll get into it in a moment. I'll
Okay.
Once we come back around, I'm gonna get into it. But yeah, let me just finish up with expectations. Drew, what were your expectations coming into this album?
Well, I was expecting what normally happens when you bring something from South Korea on, which is it's going to be very well produced. The vocals are going to be insanely good. And then the musical genre can sometimes vary from your more pure pop sort of things to more R&B stuff. I kept thinking to myself, I know this band name. Where do I know this from? It wasn't until after my first couple of listens that I looked it up and I was like, oh, right. He was in this band. I'm an idiot. That I was like he got it.
It's that guy. Okay. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It was one of those for me. I was like, now the sound of this group makes total sense in my head now.
Yes. Bryce, what expectations did you have coming into this?
A little similar to Drew, a very high, very forgive the pun, very shiny production, very but very, very tight production. Though I think I was expecting a little bit more of the, sort of the pop rap sort of stuff that is out today, where it's a lot of like instrumental hooks instead of like choruses. I was expecting more of like a real like if this was a dance group, I feel like that's what I was more expecting, where they get a lot of dance breaks and stuff. But that was really my only thing. I also did not expect as much just general variety in terms of aesthetic on the album. And but as far as expectations, that's kind of what I was going into it.
Yeah, I think so like we're talking about. It's a unique thing, with the repackage with boy groups. If you really want to break it down to it, it's like the Game of the Year edition, except that it literally is they either held back a few tracks or recorded a few more tracks, and now they get to sell the same fans the album a second time, so they can double dip. It's the same reason why they make 2 versions of an album. Like this is version A, version B. It's slightly different covers. Also, it is the double dipping of the sales, so which is kind of the the little bit of the skeevy business side of it. Yeah,
it's very Jim Sterling ranty.
Yes. Which is that being said, it did bring us some nice tracks to be added to the album, which I will get to in the next segment. But overall, I think this album is I said how this is my favorite boy band, is my favorite boy group. This album kind of has everything I want from K-pop. Like it's the sounds are really diverse. It explores a lot of different stuff. I think owing itself to kind of being, again, the boy groups tend to have the tighter fandoms, which means they kind of can print money. So if they could either go, boy groups could either, for that reason, they could go either way. They could either coast and do blase bullcrap, Super Junior, or they could kind of have free reign to experiment and do whatever the hell they want. They could kind of like do their, okay, here's the hit we need you to have as a hit. All right, just do whatever the hell you want you have a full album, because that's what your fans will want. So just do it, and then they can work with whatever producers they want. So they get a lot of different sounds that work really well. The beats are really fun.
You would consider this relatively experimental in terms of
relatively in
that corner.
Yeah, I mean, not as experimental as some other stuff. It's just they get to try some fun stuff.
It's more creative.
More creative. Not like whoa out there experimental. They just kind of get to like do stuff that they find fun. It's still like catchy. It's still going for like a cat for going for hooks and going for fun songs, but they get to just kind of play a little bit. But this is how they play. They're born and raised and bred in the pop music industry and in these styles of music. So this is how they play, rather than a super heady musician plays with like doing all kinds of stuff. So this is how they create fun beats. They kind of the energy is really fun. The vocals are really great. Like they do a lot of fun stuff with harmonies. But everybody gets their time to shine. Jonghyun, of course, sounds amazing, but you get somebody else who's fantastic vocally. Onyu is just amazing vocally. You get a lot of really great moments from Taemin, a lot of cool moments from Minho as well, and Key has his moments as well. Like they all have their moments to shine as far as like the vocals, but definitely some great stuff from Jonghyun and Onyu. And I think that this is why I love this group, because it just has everything everything I want from K-pop, like all those elements that just kind of come together really well. Let's go to you guys. David, how would you describe this album musically? What would be the themes elements you would zero in on?
To compound on everything that Petey just said, these guys were born and bred in this, and with this album I hear that a lot. I hear a complete project creation that is led by some talented guys with producers and everything that you need to make an album that will generally print money. You're not going to go wrong with this. This is a product that will sell. And it is consistently good from start to finish. And when I talk about the songs that I like and my conclusive thoughts, I'll expound on my thoughts on that in general, and maybe just a little bit on the creation of pop music and the machine that creates pop music a little bit later. But overall, this is just a good creation, and it is a good product that has been put out by some talented, capable people.
Mm-hmm. Drew, how would you describe this album musically?
This whole thing, every time we bring up K-pop, I feel like is getting a little ridiculous, because the thing about it is that all of these bands, like the production side is just immaculate to the point of almost parody. Like it is like just ridiculously well done, all of it. Like you can tell that these guys and the producers and the engineers like sat in the studio like really thinking about like every move, which I think is really cool. Like to have that sort of freedom to just sit there and be like, nah, we want to do something and we want to do it to a spit shine, I think is really cool. Also, every time there's something with even like that, like 80s, 90s R&B tinge to it coming out of South Korea, it is just infectious in a way that R&B just isn't over here as much. Like, there's just something to it that's just fun and, like, really going for it. I found myself dancing around in my chair and while I'm cleaning and while I'm driving, which dancing while you're driving is a little dangerous. I understand this. But it happens. You got to get a little groove on in traffic, especially when I had a longer commute than normal this week. It isn't a hard formula. It isn't weird to see how you get there. It's fun dancing, like R&B dance pop type of stuff. And these guys do it right. It's a fine-tuned craft that they thought of. And when you look up history about these guys, like, they've thought about it. And I think that's really cool. Like, the art to them doesn't stop at just the music. It's like, okay, what are we wearing for this era of the band? What are we wearing for that era of the band? What are the dance moves we're doing in each era, and how are they going to change? And I think that's really cool, and something that like the boy bands of like yesteryear didn't like in America, like your New Editions, your New Kids on the Blocks, your NSYNCs didn't last long enough for them to have that sort of like, hey, we're gonna do new eras in this, and we're gonna change our look and our sound, and like we're gonna try different stuff. Like New Edition didn't last that long. They just started doing their own thing at a certain point.
I mean,
like they just.
With the exception of all of them coming back now, that they all want to go back and print money, but yeah.
Bobby cannot sing anymore.
Yeah, no. I can't sing.
God, no.
No, really can't.
God bless them.
And then New Edition did it, and then like New Kids on the Block were like, hey, the guys that we ripped off, like, they're doing it, let's do it too.
Yes.
And then they can't do it neither. And it's like, oh God.
I hear Backstreet Boys are doing all right, though.
That new Backstreet Boys song.
They're doing all right.
Yeah, that new Backstreet Boys song is pretty tight. I think it's pretty okay.
It's the difference from being 20 years removed from what you're doing from being 35 years removed from what you're doing. I think is the difference there.
Yeah. But yeah. Fair. Bryce, how would you describe this album musically? What would be the things that stand out?
I think the thing that kind of stood out to me was that, on the production side, everything is iron tight. But I think actually the song selection is maybe a little too mixed, and I don't think that I think there's a bad song on the album, but I don't think that there are any like disasters. But I also think that I was scrolling through the track list trying to really piece out like any like big tracks for me, and I could only really think of like two kind of, and it's I wouldn't even call any track on here filler. It's just I don't feel cohesion necessarily. I don't quite feel cohesion. You've got a mix of this like house elements plus dance and funk plus really just straight up studio ballads on top of like these kind of rap sort of things. And I think on one hand it is a lot of variety and it's a lot of range, but I have a little trouble, like I have trouble defining this album other than saying like, oh, it's like it's a mainstream sort of pop album, because that's kind of what a mainstream pop album is, especially in lots of parts of the world where just like here we've got to do some album tracks. So this one's going to be kind of a little 90s R&B ish. This one's going to have a little bit of a tropical sort of sound. Like just get a little bit of all of these little buckets, and you kind of have a lot of different sounds. So I guess if I would describe it, I would say like it is the best version of this thing. And I think for most people even, this is going to be what they're looking for out of a pop record. Yeah. I don't know. I this all sounds like really negative, but that's I think that's just the one sticking point on it for me is that I don't. If there's a concept here, I'm only now looking at the Wikipedia and they're trying to sell us as like a horror sort of thing, and I don't feel it aesthetically, which is where a lot of the sort of the mismatch comes from is the lyrical side, but you even should still get some of that out of the aesthetics. But it is masterfully well made. The singing is great. There's tons of really good uses of rhythm that just feel I don't know, they feel really well considered and really special. So I think there's some good stuff on here. I don't know if I have like, it's not all A pluses, right? It's an A album. It's an A album, but there aren't a lot of A
plus player, as it were.
Yes, an A. It's got great stuff.
Sure.
Yes. But yeah, so like as we get into some of the tracks, definitely hear what you're talking about. Where like you could kind of want, some could want for more cohesion. But let's talk about some of the key tracks. Let's do the Record Breakers thing. I'm going to do the Record Breakers thing, obviously. Talk about the title track that's actually what we call a title track as well, not just a promotional single, but Married to the Music. It was the single that they dropped so that they could resell the same album. Yeah. But it was still a really fun song. It is really fun, funky song. It's super catchy. It's got the thing that I'm always back and forth on that most of the time I don't like, but I didn't mind it in this, which is the baked in crowd interaction. Oddly enough, which is they bake it into the track so they don't forget to do it, which is of course the call and response part in that song. Are you married to the music? We're married to the oddly enough, the only other example that comes to mind is Limp Bizkit's $3 Bill Y'all, where they had some of that, which is, I don't know why that's the thing that just comes to mind, but yeah, the baked in crowd interactions.
Also, like, really impressive singing on Married to the Music.
Yeah,
a lot of high register shit in there.
Yeah. Jonghyun in particular, he starts it off and just hooks me immediately. Yeah.
Okay.
I've been looking up the song on TJ Media's, the people that provide the karaoke for that place we went to, because they have all the songs on their YouTube, and I've been like looking at that song, just thinking, like, and then just like realizing, like, could I do this? Maybe. But moving on. So View, which is the original promotional single for the Odd original album, of course written by Jonghyun himself, and kind of a co-composed, I believe, as well. It's also really fun. This is like more of that house sound, I believe, was more of that into this one. It's kind of like, it's the first of the SM Entertainment house trilogy, which is that one, FX's Four Walls, and Luna's Free Somebody. That is the house trilogy from SM Entertainment, from across two different bands and a solo album, solo release. So it's like, that's how I remember it. But it is fun. It is like, it has a cool vibe to it. The video is also really fun. Obviously, it's K-pop, so like in my head, the visual elements are intertwined with the sound. But like, the song is really great. Like the vocals are really cool, and it just has a really cool like feel to it. There's a couple other like really cool album tracks. Trigger just has a cool like an energy to it. Almost, it has some wub-wubs in there a little bit, but I think that worked really well. Romance is a nice little like super throwback with kind of like, has that really interesting beginning, almost like a 70s feel to it, like a 70s R&B feel to it. I think works really well. Well, let's go to you guys. David, what would be some of the key tracks for you?
Odd Eye. There was nothing about this that I didn't like. The falsetto in the chorus, the rap verses, it hit all of the K-pop checkboxes that I expect. Also, Romance, I really enjoyed the chorus in that one. Farewell, My Love was kind of the stock 90s R&B song, and I respected that. Hold You, really enjoyed the harmonies, and the hook on that song was absolutely outstanding. And also Woof Woof, because that was just a straight up Jackson 5 song.
Yes.
I defy you to listen to that song and tell me you don't hear the Jacksons circa 1973. Also, I will say, an encore, and this is going to tie into my conclusive thoughts later. This was kind of the core of the issue that I had with this. They named the song an encore. It's the final track on the album. And they clearly made this on purpose, by design, to be a song they would have at the end of their shows.
Yes.
That's cheating.
Sure. Well, no, come
That's
on.
cheating.
No, there are plenty of artists who intentionally track out albums to match the feeling of a live show.
Yeah.
It's cheating.
Yeah. I would say, yeah, it's the song. That song is meant to be performed at the end of the show with their tour t-shirt, with their concert t-shirts on instead of their regular outfits, while they're throwing little signed balls to the audience or balloons or something, like while they're walking around with their mics, not doing no choreography, and just waving,
I think
doing hearts.
And fans are crying and waving their hands. PD,
yeah.
Is that what they're doing?
Yes.
Are they crying?
Yes.
God.
We are. I mean, they are. Yes. Drew, what would be some of the key tracks for you?
Well, I did want to say, hey, band I was in, we may have had a song that we ended up entitling A Portrait of Goodbye. And then 3 shows after we created that one, we realized, why are we not ending every show with the song that says goodbye? So that was sort of backhanded into becoming our ending set. Sometimes it falls into your lap. Sometimes it's not intentional. But
I have a hard time believing anything happening here isn't intentional.
We were a ska band. You think that we intended it? No, but they definitely did. But Married to the Music, it's weird. 2 of the songs that like really caught my eye, come to find out, they were the ones that were added in. Married to the Music, starting out with something that like felt to me very, if I can call back again to like New Edition Michael Jackson era, as far as like the composition of it, just the base of that was just a Simple Science callback to like that era, and I'm completely cool with that. Like, as a guy who plays bass and likes that era of pop R&B, I'm down. I think it was a perfect addition to it. I think that song is possibly my favorite on the entire album. Odd Eye comes in close second for me. Just a cool, laid back, like sort of groovy, dark track. With that little bit of sneer to it, I really dig. And then Chocolate. The fuzzed out tone on those synths was so cool. Like the entire time I was like, oh man, like just the style of that was just like, I was like, yep, nope, this is all I need. I'm cool with all of this.
Yeah.
Super down.
Yeah. Also, shout out to Big Bad Voodoo Daddy, who did create a song called "So Long, Farewell, Goodbye," which I've sung at karaoke multiple times.
Completely okay with any Big Bad Voodoo Daddy. Shout out.
Yes. Bryce, what would be some of the key tracks for you?
The 2 for me were View, like we were talking about before. I think that's an example of a house style pop track that doesn't try to lean into the 90s house sound, because even though it has elements of those from some of the synth use to just kind of how it's structured, it doesn't feel like a throwback. It feels like kind of a fresh take on that style. And the other one is Farewell My Love. Man, I think of the ballads on this album, Farewell My Love is my favorite. I think it's one of the best, just between like the sort of emotion power that it builds up to in that chorus, and how really kind of catchy that chorus is. I think that's one of the best examples of the rhythm of this album, the lyrical rhythm specifically, is that chorus, and it kind of feels exciting and interesting in what is probably supposed to be a pretty emotional sort of song, but it's great, and the instrumentation, like man, I don't know the name of the other ballad that is more a pretty standard fare studio pop album, but I feel like Farewell My Love is like night and day away from a traditional sort of ballad. Yeah. So those are really my 2.
Yeah, I think that is a fantastic track. I think overall. Let's bring it back around the horn. Talk about some conclusive thoughts. David, what would be your conclusion on this album as a whole?
Petey, you know you're my boy and I love you, so please don't be mad. I will say, disclaimer, there is a lot on this album that I truly do genuinely fucks with. I do. There are like 6 or 7 tracks. But I am reminded of my favorite musician in the last decade or so, Jem Godfrey, frontman and keyboardist of the band Frost, who his day job was originally in doing pop songs and jingles for the BBC and the like. And he's helped platinum selling artists in the UK. He's won awards in the UK. But sometime around 2004, something in him needed to go completely in the opposite direction and rediscover his love of progressive rock. And he started Frost and released one of the most important albums of my life in 2006 called Million Town. And after listening to this album, I've never related to Jem Godfrey more. Because this was an enjoyable album, but it was long. It was very, very long. Like when it got to Trigger, the 7th track, I had to take a break. Because for me, this was a lot of K-pop. It was just a lot.
Yes.
Not saying it was bad, because it wasn't. It was just a lot. And as someone who is not in love with K-pop and the Korean pop music industry and the production and everything that goes into it, and someone who is not able to ignore what I see when I see these concerts and hear these albums, I hear studio producers making conscious decisions to do things as opposed to musicians creating. I see performers doing things to evoke emotion from their fans, like the song and Encore. They made that for the sole purpose of it being the last song in their set, not what Drew said of realizing, hey, that's a good idea. They made that with the purpose in mind. So much of this is so perfectly produced and processed and created. It was just at the point where me being the twisted and jaded and cynical soul that I am, it just got to the point where I'd had enough. And there were a lot of tracks on this that I really, really enjoyed, and I will not take away from Shinee. I will not take away from their fan base at all.
Yes.
There's a lot on here that's good. There's a lot on here that I would enjoy. If this were in an EP, I would not be saying any of this. But it needs to be in an EP because this whole album was just a lot. PD, I love you. You know that. But I've had enough K-pop for a while. I've
Wow.
I mean,
K-pop for a while.
Oh.
I love
what are you saying?
And I'm not saying this was bad.
We've got
I'm
a
not
whole
saying
just
it's bad.
a whole drawer, a shelf drawer to get through.
But I'm not. I won't be bringing on another prog album involving Jem Godfrey or John Mitchell on for a little while.
Yes.
Because I know I can kind of become a bit of an old bit. And PD, this was a good album. I enjoyed it, but it was long, and I've had enough K-pop for a little bit.
Wow.
Yes. I think it'll be a little while before bringing because I don't think we really have any
I
other
will say,
albums in mind.
I've had a full 5-course meal of K-pop, PD.
Yes.
I've had a 5-course meal of K-pop. I'm full.
Yes. Drew, what would be your conclusion on this album as a whole?
I had fun. That was pretty much it. Yes, this is Korean pop, so there's a bit of a, like I said, a manufactured spit and polish to it. I can respect it for sure. It was fun from top to bottom. There is nothing wrong with this record, in my opinion. Which is weird. Like, because it becomes that like uncanny valley thing, right? There's nothing bad on it, so like what happened to the floss? Like it got spit polished out. That's sort of what this is known for, right? But that being said, I can't look you in the eye and say that like I didn't have fun with it and I didn't end up dancing to it. It's like that pop hit that comes on. Look, Enrique Iglesias is one of my like guilty pleasures for a reason. Sometimes there's just some pop that you just dig on, and that's okay. And
it is. And I'm not saying it isn't. I'm not saying it isn't. I promise. I promise.
You're just saying, maybe you want to just have some singles in your playlists rather than the whole album, which is fine. I think it is fair. It's K-pop albums are a lot to consume when they actually do happen. But yeah, Bryce,
my next album coming, Euphoria. Actually,
Def Leppard album.
Nice. Bryce, what would be your conclusion on this album as a whole?
Listening to this album has actually reminded me of my first time really listening to J-pop, because I listen to a lot of Japanese music now, or have been for high school. And so I in very concrete terms, this experience was very similar, right? Like language I don't really know, kind of a big general facing pop group, and kind of having a lot of variety in terms of tracks. And I think in that sense, like I think this would be like a really, really strong introduction to K-pop for somebody. And I don't know. I don't know that I'll necessarily be spinning the whole album, but there are definitely a few things that I'm going to pull out of here and put on my repeat playlist. Because I think there's a little something for everybody here. Even just hearing, like, all of us kind of felt like we had some really different favorite tracks on here. And I think that just kind of speaks to how much this album is for the mainstream and just kind of for everyone. There's something here. There's not just something here, but there's a couple of things here for everyone.
Yeah.
And I think that's a considerable value for, if you're trying to be a pop group.
Yeah. Which is kind of hilariously almost antithetical to what boy groups have, because they usually have trouble breaking into the mainstream because they mostly just play to their fandom and kind of do things that work to their fandom, and boy groups,
Sure. There's something to be said about like taking a theme and really running with it and kind of being known for having a sound or a style.
Yeah, and I think that's what Shinee are have a little bit more, that they are able to break a little bit more into the mainstream than I think other boy groups do. They're that little specific class where they can actually have a fandom, but also kind of be a little bit mainstream, which is really cool. I think, yeah.
Also, a very I don't know the best way to say this, because I don't talk enough about K-pop or with people who know K-pop. Yeah. But a very like American sounding album. Yeah. Like, and I think that's just kind of this is painting with a very broad brush now, but I think kind of across K-pop, it is very Western in terms of its aesthetics.
Yeah.
And you really feel it with some parts of the album, but then other parts feel like, oh, that's not really what you would throw on as like an album track in an American pop album. That's more of like an Eastern thing to do. Like, I think like Romance, I've got Romance playing in my earbud right now. Like, this is not an American album track. This is not a filler track in an American album. And so it's interesting to kind of see both splashes of both.
Yeah. And I think I've talked about how like in K-pop, there's more Western influence in K-pop because they have to export.
Right.
They have to export.
And that's
Japan doesn't feel they need to export, but K-pop has to export because it's South Korea is tiny. Like, it would probably take you longer to get to like San Antonio, I think, or like
Is that right?
or something. No, like no, I'm
San
thinking
Antonio's
maybe
about an hour and a
Houston.
half.
No, Houston. I'm thinking Houston. Sorry,
Okay,
I'm
so
like,
like 3 hours.
or 4 hours, like from then it would take
Yeah.
for Seoul
South
to
Korea is
Busan.
tiny.
South Korea is
Wow.
tiny. If you just Google South Korea size compared to Texas, and you'll see like the they'll have like a little
But, like,
overlay, and it's
12% of their population is actually in a pop group of some kind.
yeah. Well. Yeah, that's the thing. But most of them are what you would call nugu groups. But yeah, I think concluding on this album is that it is a fun pop album. It is super tight. It is super catchy. It is diverse just because you get to like do a lot of different. They get to do a lot of different styles. It is with a strong design, in it. But it is with a heavy hand design wise, but it is, I think this late that late into their career, they had a little bit more of an influence in their albums, so you get to see a little bit more like what they like to do for fun. But yeah, at the end of the day, like I said, this is one of the I've talked about this is one of the few bro groups that I had like been enamored with. I'm what people in the know would call a girl group stan. I've got Luna up here, I've got EXID up there, I've got Red Velvet over my head behind me, I've got Girls' Generation up in the corner up there, I've got Ladies Code over there. More into the girl groups.
Can we take a second to talk about how it's become okay to be a stan when that entire song is like that dude commits suicide because he's nuts?
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
we can't because it's not okay.
No, I think you kind of nailed it. I think you kind of got all of it
Yeah.
in the one take.
Yeah.
I was like,
I mean, it's a pretty simple take, and I think it still
My
stands.
my
asking.
lukewarm take of, hey, maybe this is weird.
Yeah. It's one of those things just like, yeah. But yeah, I'm more of the groups that I've been enamored with have mainly been girl groups. Like if you could recognize K-pop album spines, you would notice a majority of girl groups there, including that big Mamamoo in the middle. The Mamamoo.
Yeah, I did not know Shinee by name, so before I hit play, I kind of was expecting it to be a girl group.
Yeah, which is kind of makes sense. But I think that they still hit a lot of what I like about K-pop. Like it has a lot of familiar sounds that work well, but a lot of new, fresher sounds. It's still at the end, at its core, it does the fun thing of like tickling that part of me that music theory proves works with when it comes to pop music, but then I don't have to know the lyrics, so I can just enjoy the melodies and the fun and the beats and whatnot. But on top of that, it has a really cool, diverse sound that lets me explore some cool stuff. And at the end of the day, more than anything, yeah, I would say, do I listen to this album on the whole completely regularly? No. Do I do it often? Not really. Is it more like I have like the hits and a couple of the other ones? But I think overall it's just a really cool exploration of their sound on this album. And I think that's what works about this. Yeah. There's not much else to say other than me. I forgot to hold the physical copy up. Those are our thoughts on Married to Music. Now we get to the main event of the evening with our haiku reviews. We're kind of sum it all up in poetic form. Let's get down to it. David, what is your haiku?
The sweet K-pop feels dragged on a bit, got corny. Don't let me stop you.
Yes. Drew, what is your haiku?
One great album from a big Korean boy band. Shine on, you diamonds.
Nice. Bryce, what is your haiku?
Pure pop and rhythm, a grab bag of faces, yeah. Damn, those boys can sing.
Mm-hmm. And of course, my haiku. 5 stars shining bright. Great pop tunes with throwback feel. Music makes great spouse. Those are our thoughts on Shinee's Married to the Music. You can, of course, find it on our Spotify playlist. Play Record Breakers, the home game. Do your due diligence and your due diligence. Do the homework. On the Spotify playlist will be next week's record, and that one's going to be provided by David. David, what do you have for us next week?
The album that I will be bringing next week is the 2016 release by Portland, Oregon electronic / vaporwave artist Vectroid, and the album is entitled Seed and Synthetic Earth.
Mm-hmm. So look forward to that next week. But that is, of course, next week, and this is this week. And you can, of course, find us all over the internet. David is at Call Me DJM. Drew is at Xtruciferx. Bryce is at Brycast, Brycas, or at trendinglemon.com. I'm at PD Rave. The show is at 4 Record Breakers. That's number 4 Record Breakers. RecordBreakersPodcast.com. RecordBreakersPodcast@gmail.com. Rebelli.net if you listen to other shows. Rebelli TV on YouTube. Find us everywhere you find podcasts. Like, share, subscribe, leave comments, leave feedback. Let us know what you thought of the album in the comments on the website or on the YouTube or whatever. Do all the things. Review, blah, 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 blah. Until next time, hasta los huevos.
Toodaloo.
Diamond Club hopes you have enjoyed this program.